How's it going, Chasers? We're back with another podcast, and today's guest is a very interesting mix of a bunch of different things. J.J Jackson is the head distiller at Lucky Science Distillery in the Pennsylvania area, where they're doing some very cool, different things around creating pre-prohibition style spirits under the brand name of Honest Hillbilly. I found that part of the discussion super insightful and very, very, well, it's just straight up fascinating, to be honest. He also has his own brand that he runs through the same distillery called the Out Post Distillery. You can catch him on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under the Out Post Distillery. Or you can have a look at luckysciencespirits.com to check out their products, what they're making, and a little bit of the story about the distillery. Lucky Science is also on Instagram and Facebook. You may also recognize J.J Jackson from the Moonshiners TV show. And we, at the end of this podcast, JJ's kind enough to have a very frank, as open as he could be, discussion about the show, which I'll be honest, kind of changed my mind about a few things. In any case, without further ado, let's get stuck into the podcast. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a little while, dude. Like, you are a interesting mix of different things all rolled in together. I'm going to dangle this little nugget in front of everyone and say that JJ's been on the Moonshiners show for, what was it, season 12, 13, and you're recording 14. Is that correct?
That is correct, brother.
We're going to put a pin in that and put it aside because I've learned very quickly that JJ is legit. He knows what the fuck he's talking about, and he's doing some very cool stuff completely separated from that show. So let's talk about that at the end. Let's get into the stuff that has a little more meat on the bone, dude. So you're working as a head distiller, and I believe with some equity in the company as well. So do you want to tell us about that company and kind of the idea behind what you guys are doing?
Yeah, man. Well, like you said, everybody needs a shoe in the door, so to speak. And I think it's been a lot of my life, trying to figure out how to get my shoe in the door in a lot of different things. But this was a no-brainer. But, as a head distiller now, and as a professional, and having a stake in this company, I work for a company. It's called Lucky Science Spirits. We're a craft distillery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We make an array of products, some high-end, award-winning botanical spirits, whiskey, and then all the way down to what I guess we separated out as other brands. Our brand, Honest Hillbilly, which is more of a heritage pre-prohibition style spirits brand. And then we have the Out Post, which is my personal brand. That's kind of a tip of the hat to my buddies. I was in the Army for a number of years, and it's kind of a tip of the hat to my service for that brand. But, as the head distiller of this company, we have meetings about the direction that we want to go, but more often than not, that baton is passed to me to make the decision. Which, as a moonshiner, man, I'm chock full, I'm up to here with ideas right now. I you know what I mean? Home distiller, moonshine, whatever you want to qualify it as. I also know how to do a lot of things on a budget.
Right.
And I'm not afraid to work my tail off to get it done. You know what I mean? Funnily enough, I know that you have been on the HD forum a lot over the past years, and also, funnily enough, my business partner here, Christian, he's also on the HD forum, and that's how we met.
Oh, okay, well,
yeah. I messaged him on there, and I was like, "Hey, you look like you're in Pittsburgh, or at least your profile says so." And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "You want to meet up?" He's like, "Yeah, here's the address. When you get here, you'll know you're in the right place."
Oh, okay.
I was like, I may have to bring some extra equipment with me to the right place. But I got here and I was like, oh, it's a distillery.
Oh, you had no idea. You just thought you were having a clandestine meetup for people that would not like to know that you're having a meetup.
That is, that's exactly what I thought, and I was quite pleasantly surprised when he's like, "Oh no, here's all of our stills. Here's what we're doing here. Here's what we got going on with this," and I was like, "Oh man, like." So I felt like I wasn't in such a microcosm in like the home, because those forums can make you feel that way, like you're really in this like vacuum where nobody is actually near you.
Totally.
Nobody
totally.
else is doing this, of course, because it's illegal. And of course, upstanding people don't actually do things like this. And it's like, well, no, there's a million people in your backyard that are probably doing it. And like last time I checked, how many members on that forum? Like,
there's a
couple
lot,
100,000.
There's a lot. I don't get that. I don't really get in there nearly as much anymore. I still use it as research. Like I'll Google stuff and slap, how to blah, 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 space home distiller. Cause it's a great, if nothing else, it's a great place to go and like find the end of the string, right? Like a little thing you can grab and keep pulling on, keep searching. But yeah,
well, you can thank my business partner, Christian, for that, because, he was a part of the people who wrote the wiki for that. So,
how good.
Yeah.
Crazy. There's some interesting heritage there, dude. That's, that's full on, how would you put it? Like internet fame. It's kind of like YouTube, right? I was having this discussion the other day. There's maybe 15 years ago, every freaking person knew who Brad Pitt was. Everyone knew who Brad Pitt was, but no one really gave a shit. Mm-hmm. Like they'd see Brad Pitt at the airport and they'd be, oh crap, it's Brad Pitt. And now YouTube and internet fame's come along and no one knows who the hell you are. Like no one gives a flying fornication, but the people that do, they really care, like, so for the people that know the Home Distiller Wiki, that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I felt the same way because I was like, I read until my eyes bled. I need to tell you about how I read until my eyes bled, brother. Like, I mean, same thing with me. Like, I'm on the show, and like, people in my life just like to remind me, like, bro, like, you know what, you're Walmart famous, like, because it's true. I can go everywhere else and nobody knows who I am. But the minute I stand in line at Walmart, it's like, oh, there's Moonshiner Joe. Like,
does that say something about the Moonshiners demographic or the Walmart demographic?
Well, I think it says more about people. It's the spirit of this thing, man. Like, just like I said about being able to be crafty on a budget, like, people are hand to mouth in a lot of places, and they can appreciate the spirit of that. And I think that's why a lot of people like the show. We can talk more about that later, but I mean, I think in the spirit of craft distilling, that's where I aim more often than not. And, that's a trajectory of something like Honest Hillbilly, where it's like, I want to be as ethically responsible and economically responsible as possible and show other people how they can do the same thing, especially people who grow grain, people who are orchard owners and painstakingly grow fruit, which is a fickle business.
Well, let's get into that, dude. So you've got the three brands. All of them are produced on site, right? Like they're all They're just you've split the branding up to kind of delineate concepts behind them, I guess. Let's talk about Honest Hillbilly first. And you say that it's kind of like a pre-prohibition style spirit. What do you mean by that, dude? Like, how do you define that?
So I think the spirit behind that spirit. I mean, honestly, I think that the spirit behind that is that we're as was as what was happening pre-prohibition and pre-whiskey rebellion, to be honest, as distillers in the States and worldwide, we were following the agricultural cycle of what was being grown. So whether it was fruit at the end of the summer, stone fruit, then you get into like seeded like pears, apples, and then after that, you get into grains. But there's a weird little crossover where you have grain and fruit going on at the same time. So they started making split brandies, which was a popular pre-prohibition spirit. But essentially, you're following that cycle, and whatever is excess on the marketplace, you have all of your contacts, and they bring those ingredients to the table for you because they can't sell it at the market, right? So pre-prohibition, I think that's the spirit that we're going with Honest Hillbilly, and it's about cultivating relationships and knowing where all of these ingredients come from. There's a story in every bottle. I liken it to what Waterford Distillery is doing over where they're in Ireland, right? Basically, there's a story behind every bottle because of where the ingredients came from. And pre-prohibition, you knew that, oh, that peach brandy, he got those peaches from over at Jim's farm. And Jim, he had a good haul this year, but he didn't get them up off the ground and everything. Right. But this guy was able to take the thing and turn it into liquid gold for old Jim, and that's essentially like it's like a Pied Piper thing. Like I've been on the phone with, I don't know how many orchards in our local area, like begging, pleading, like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, can I come out and like film at your orchard and just talk with you? Like, and the receptivity of people who don't know about the liquor business and don't know that their businesses used to be closely tied to the liquor business.
Yeah, interesting.
And I think that's what makes it pre-prohibition, because before prohibition, a lot of those orchards were extremely tied to this distilling business. And during prohibition, I can't remember, it's like Susie, the axe lady, like she wasn't carrying around an axe to bust up whiskey barrels. They were chopping down orchards in the United States. And wow. I think I had one of Alan Bishop's friends, I think Aiden Pemberton, he said that we had lost, he's a cider expert, and he said that we had lost something like 1,500 varietals of apples during Prohibition because they just went through and cut down all the trees because people were making brandy with it.
Yeah,
cider.
Wow.
And it's like all that heritage gone.
I had no idea, dude. Like I mean, obviously when you think about Prohibition, how do you put it? The severing of tradition in terms of making the spirit, that's obvious. Like we have this long history of making things a certain way with certain equipment, and bang, you're not allowed to do it. It's gone. And it's hard to kind of reclaim that culture, that those techniques, equipment, so on and so forth, if it's long enough. I hadn't even thought about the knock-on effects of how that affects things that on the surface aren't spirit, right? That's so crazy. I hadn't thought about that. It's really interesting.
I went out to local orchards called Ridgetop Orchards where I got my peaches and I've got some apples from them and a few different things, but like they had no idea that what they were commercially packing and then they were selling as seconds, or that they couldn't sell the things that they couldn't sell as seconds and thirds. They had no idea there was an industry for those things. They were just dumping them in the woods or using them as fertilizer, and it's like, no, your crop is as valuable as you want it to be. You know what I mean? And it gives you agency to then come into this world where I live, the spirits industry, and be like, hey, we can make a deal, but my crop is still valuable.
Yeah.
Because it's got sugar.
Yeah. And flavor. Yeah.
And flavor. Like, and I need that, you know?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, dude. Like the way that food has moved, right? Pretty much everywhere for the vast majority of all history, it was always you buy what you can get hold of. And even for cooking, it was, you know, you go to the market and pick out, you know, these are the vegetables that are in season and this is what we get. Oh man, there's no beef at the market today. I guess we're having chicken or pork, or the beef looks terrible or whatever. And you go home and you make it work. And it's turned into everything has to look the same all year round. And it's kind of more about the visual appeal than who was it? I think I was watching like a Anthony Bourdain or someone like that video, and he went and talked to the farmers about, it can't have been Anthony, it was someone, I don't know, one of those celebrity chefs that were working directly with the growers to try and have better food in their restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that the farmer said about what they were doing was all about the visuals: bigger, brighter, smoother, you know, homogeneous color, so on and so forth. He's like, yeah, but what about the flavor? And the farmer looked at him and said, in 20 years of doing this, no one has ever asked me about trying to grow for flavor. And it's bonkers. Like, you don't realize how much that kind of, I don't know, is it commodification, I guess, has crept into produce?
I think speaking to like everything that I make, like it's about the terroir of the thing. Like it has to be like it. And me and Christian, my partner, like we've agreed from day one. It's like, if I'm going to make something, it can't just be something. It has to be something special. And that is what's wrapped up and included in that thing. Because of the ingredients, because of the people behind the ingredients, because of it's their work translated into the work that I do, translated into what's in the bottle.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's, you know, that's what post-prohibition, I feel like the commercialization and the commodification of the industry, like it went to pressing a button or whiskey en masse.
Well, it's consistency, isn't it? There is something to be said for that in terms of branding. I mean, that's the whole McDonald's thing, right? Like, no one goes to McDonald's because it's the best, but you can go to McDonald's damn near anywhere in the world and you know exactly what you're going to get. You can be in a country where you don't speak the language, get myself a Big Mac, and it's going to be within a very tight range of. It's still shit, but you know what it's going to be. And
that's like,
and people
that's
want
like
that in spirits. Yeah. Like, I can understand that.
I talked to a rum producer that I've got a good relationship with, and they use basically Demerara or turbinado sugar to make the rum because of the inconsistencies in molasses.
Yep.
And I agree, but then I also disagree, because if you're going to create something special, the inconsistencies, I think, are what make it special in terms of flavor profile, time of the year, where you got it from. And that's what I'm trying to put in a bottle instead of, I'm not making Jack Daniels. Like,
well, that's the thing, right? Like, if you go to the bottle store and pick up a bottle of Jack Daniels or Johnny Walker or even like Lafroig, Ardbeg, all of those things, you pick it up. You don't want to be surprised when you pour the bottle, right? You want it to taste like the last damn bottle of Lafroig 10. And I get that. That's cool. But as a distiller, how do you put it? It's a giant opportunity to do what you're doing. It's also terrifying because it's suddenly going back to that artistic thing, right? It's not about restraining variables. I mean, obviously it still is, but you know, if you're Johnny Walker, Jack Daniels, Lafroig, Your game is to standardize fucking everything. The grain needs to be exactly the same as last time. You need to, ferment at the same temperature, pitch the same yeast. Everything needs to be as similar as humanly possible, and then you still have to give it to the blenders to make it similar. But that's, how do you put it? That's it's much easier to know when you're going astray, right? Like the spec sheet comes in for the grain, you're like, ooh, there's something wrong. Whereas when you're doing what you're doing, you start from nothing. You're like, I don't even know if I'm using grain. Like, what's available this week? That's terrifying, dude. Like, and to be able to, like, it's one thing for that to be your hobby. And that's what, like, it's even more so for me. I can't even make the same thing twice, even if I did have the same, because I got to have a different video, right? Like, I at least need to have a different thing. But then, how do you put it? For the livelihood, for feeding my kids and paying my mortgage to come from, that has to also be good. Like, for me, if I fuck up and it's terrible, it's not a big issue, right? Like, the video is almost more fun if it's horrible than if it's good. So I guess what I'm saying is that's dope, dude. Like, it takes a giant leap of faith to be able to say, hey, look, we need to make something. I don't know what we're going to make.
I am still waiting for you to make a Boca style still.
You know what's really funny, dude? You know what's really funny? I'm planning on making a new. I want to put some more like backgrounds around the shed, so I've got more. I can, even if I'm just doing a talkie bit, I can just kind of cut the camera and move somewhere else and have it be a little bit more visually interesting. And everyone's got it, and mine's larger than most. But there's the shit corner in the shed where I don't know what this is. Yeah. It gets thrown in that corner. I'll deal with it later. I'm like, well, that's probably the perfect place to build a background. And I started cleaning it out, and I found the Boca head that I started making, and then was like, you know what? CCVM would be way easier. I'll go with that. So I found this like part-made Boca head, and now it's sitting there. And I was kind of thinking I should probably do something with that, just for funsies.
Sorry, I will. Let me tell your audience, you are proud. You are the reason that I started doing this in the first place. So, hats off to you. I watched you in your garage, and I watched you in your shed while I was in my garage, and I was like, I could do what I could do. Because I came from a pipe valve and fitting background, I sold pipe valves and fittings. So I was like,
I've still got no idea what I'm doing with damn near anything, dude. Like, that was never the premise of the channel. It's not like Guru Jesse. It's like I don't know what I'm doing. I'll try and figure it out, and then come along with me.
Yeah.
How cool is that, dude? That makes me super freaking happy, man. Like, it makes me happy when I hear someone say, the two things that really make me proud, probably more content is the word in terms of like doing what I do is, hey, Jesse, I've just made my first mash and distilled it. And then everything after that, I don't care. But, it's amazing. Yeah. Like, let's talk in 6 months and see if you still think it's amazing, or it's terrible. Don't keep going, bro. Like, either way. And then the other one is exactly your story. Is I started watching your videos. I've done, blah, 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 something in between. And now I've just opened a distillery or like just got a job in the industry. It makes me so happy, dude.
I mean, I think, as a resource, like, that's one of the things that I can appreciate about the opportunity I had to be on the television show. It's like, I have people in my DMs asking them about the science behind it. Like, it's not so much that, and I think that you probably think of it the same way. It's like, it's not so, I don't get very many requests about the television program. I get requests about like, help me, my mash is stuck at 1.02. I can't get this. I can't do that. And then like, do you have any opinions about this, or what's a good recipe for blah? Like, and like, I think that is, I think that source of community is also a part of what I feel like this Honest Hillbilly brand is like that pre-prohibition county distiller, local distiller, farm distiller. Everybody was symbiotic, sharing the ideas. It was going to be different from one year to the next. Of course, it was drier last year than it was this year. Like, all of that is a part of the symbiosis of this environment. And that's why I wanted to bring, I wanted to bring it all together, and especially like me and you. It's like, shit, man, like this is like closing the circle.
Yeah, it's awesome, dude. Do you think there's kind of a change on that front? Like a lot of my feeling, and you know what? I've never actually put two and two together, but I wonder if the standardization, commoditization of spirits and the slight move away from that ties into it as well. When everything's commoditized and it's a formula and it's a straight flow chart. You do this. There's no branching. There's no what ifs. Like, we don't like what ifs. Mm-hmm. When you take that all away, it turns into an industry secret, right? Like, if I steal your process, I've stolen your product. Whiskey's less like that than a lot of other things. Yeah. Because there's still the blending and the artistry in it as well. But now I feel like we're starting to move away from that. There's so, like, every new distillery that opens up, I've yet to talk to anyone who's like, oh, I'm sorry, Jesse, that's a trade secret. I can't talk about my recipe. Every now and again they do, but that's because they're actually doing something cool and new. Or whatever. They want to get it figured out before they tell anyone about it, or I understand that. But for the most part, it feels like distilling is moving way back more towards, you're my competition, but you need, like, you just blew your element. You need one? Of course, dude. Come over and grab mine. I've got two sitting out the back. Like, it feels like it's moving back towards that heaps more. Do you get that vibe?
No, I totally get that vibe. And also, like, I think that universe itself, like, I've been working with the same malt house on the not legal side and the legal side now. I've basically been alongside him since he had no employees, and now he has like 20 employees. But he is also the same type of person that now, at this point in our relationship, it's CNC Malt in Butler County, PA. I mean, he came by 2 weeks ago and he's like, I have 2 super sacks of this malted Bloody Butcher. I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. Malted Bloody Butcher corn. And I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. Will you do a test batch for me and figure out what kind of flavor profile this has? And if you're interested, and that wasn't the only time that he's done that. Like, he's, I think in the sense of the community collective part of this, like, I think that's where locally we're all heading. Like, because he now supplies the largest distillery in Western Pennsylvania with all of their malt.
That's cool. Yeah, right.
But he doesn't forget about me, like, you know what I mean? And I pick up 2 bags at a time, or I used to. Now it's more, but I used to pick up 2 bags at a time.
And you still had time for you, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it has to be that way when you're doing it craft. If it moves into a commercial distillery space and they're looking for consistency, I think you lose some of that. I guess you could like think of it like there's more resistance and less conductivity. You know what I mean?
It's a transaction more and less of a relationship. And
exactly.
I mean, let's be honest, like, we all want consistency, right? Like, you want to
for sure
actually know that your malted barley has a decent diastatic power. But I guess when we say that, I think we're both kind of saying that consistency isn't the be all end all. Like, you want to be able to experiment. You want to be able to try different things. You want to be able to go with the flow a little bit in terms of this season was bad or this season was amazing, or So you've talked a lot about the fruit for Honest Hillbilly. But you're also doing grain products for that line as well.
So for the grain products that we have for Honest Hillbilly, we have an Amanda Palmer bourbon where the base is Amanda Palmer corn, which is tied closely to Alan Bishop, who he made that strand of corn. Yeah, I know that. I know that the pawpaw fermentation, I got a whole bunch of pawpaws from somebody who knew me from the television show. Christian, come over here. Say hi. I'm bringing him in. Say hi to Jesse.
What's up, Christian? How's it going, buddy?
Yeah, I know you can't hear him, but you can at least say hello.
Hello, Jesse.
Yeah, there we go.
Does he know my secret nickname?
No, he does not know. I'm not sharing your secret nickname on the internet.
We can't dox you like that, dude.
Yeah, we can't dox you like that.
Seriously.
He knows nothing about distilling.
I know nothing about distilling. That's why he's here.
Oh, okay. This is not the wiki guy, right? I'm with you.
Yeah. It's not him.
Yeah, and people could totally not figure out who that is based on the information that's already come up. Sorry for those of you that are listening to this via audio and not with video. We've had a guest appearance.
He said in New Zealand, do bats hang upright?
We've only got, you know what? Bats are our only mammal here in New Zealand, native mammal.
Bats are their only native mammal.
They still hang upside down. Sorry to disappoint, dude.
He was commenting off camera about, so this is like a whole thing. Like, I had somebody who knew me from the television show message my farmer where I get my grain. And then while they were there getting grain for their picky chickens, because their chickens only like heirloom grain.
Hilarious.
My farmer and this random person called me on the phone and offered to bring me pawpaws. And I said, yes, of course, why not? I've never tasted one. And now I tasted one, and now they're fermenting, but my conical fermenter, they're a lot like bananas. I've just now found out because I'm looking at it. It is jettisoning out of it is jettisoning out of the airlock as we speak. So I'm just going to let it do what it does.
I'm really interested to see how pawpaw works because how do you put this? You know how often when you ferment stuff, it ends up heading a little bit towards the rotten version of that, or like supremely overripe, like too overripe. So banana, when you ferment it, will often end up, even if it wasn't that ripe, you'll get that almost overripe banana, but it kind of works with banana. It's still yum. It ends up tasting like banana cake sometimes.
Yeah.
Pawpaw in and of itself, in its prime, already almost tastes rotten. Do you know what I mean?
Indeed.
Like and it's delicious. Don't get me wrong. I freaking love it. Pawpaw or papaya or whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're from. But I could see it going almost like, what's the stinky fruit called? Durian. I could see it being almost like durian when it's fermented. Not nearly as bad, but almost. Well,
but see, I had the same, not to get too far off topic, I had the same. So when you did your mango infusion video and it ended up fishy.
Yep.
I did mango and it ended up the exact same way. I was like, holy shit. Like what are the odds? But then you like, if you think about fresh mango, there's something that's like, it's literally just like if you turn the page on mango, it's fish adjacent. Like it's right there, but you never really like. You don't know it to taste it, but it's fucking right there, you know?
Yeah. You know what's funny, dude, is after I put that video out, I had, I'm going to say at least 5 people reach out and say variations of exactly the same thing. And it was all, I'm a professional chef. Mangoes are terrifying because that can happen with food too. And the last thing you want is your dessert, which is probably what you're going to put mango in, tasting fishy, right? And it was specifically, I think it was especially if you cook it in any way, and it's a varietal issue. So they were saying that you can find mangoes that don't do that. I can't talk about distilling because I haven't gone back and revisited it, but in the culinary world, there's varieties of mangoes specifically, at least these people were saying, that you pick to make sure you don't have fish mango. So maybe it's still doable for distilling. Unfortunately, we don't get mango really at all in New Zealand. It's all imported, and that's kind of fucking terrible even when you do get it here.
Well, I couldn't turn down the prospect of fermenting North America's largest native fruit, which we like literally have. Like, I've been searching, like there's patches of them here. There's groves of them here and there, like way out in the woods that nobody's touched for years, or some people have them in their yard, and they don't even know what they are.
Yeah, right.
But like, I mean, it's native to here. Like,
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Man, I'll have to catch up with you in a couple of weeks and see how it turns out. Because
man.
I could also see it being absolutely awesome. Like if you get that kind of more, that soft, tropical, sort of generic tropical fruit flavor that Paw has with that, a little bit of that funk, man, that could go really nice in a whiskey too, eh? Like in a grain product. Yeah.
Like dried papaya. Like if you get like those chunks of dry papaya, like that's, I mean, I hope that it turns out. And I hope that I don't lose a whole bunch of shit coming out of here, but it's all right. I got a pot under it. I put a blow off tube on it into a pot just because I was like, maybe it's like bananas. I don't know. And,
it is like bananas, apparently. Hilarious. So you're using a lot of heritage / heirloom grain products as well. And is that specifically for honest hillbilly? I'm still, I don't know why. I see it written and it's HH and I want to say honest hillbilly.
Well, the funny part is that I pitched that name to Digger, who I'm on the show with. And I was like, we're going to call it Honest Hillbilly. And he looked at me, he's like, you ever met one? And I was like, let me think here. I don't know. Maybe I haven't. But yeah, so all the grain that we're using at the distillery as a whole is heirloom grain.
Okay, so it's not just for that brand. It's everything distillery wide. Okay, interesting.
It's everything. And we're sourcing locally because if you're going to taste what I'm making, I want you to taste Western Pennsylvania in the freaking bottle. It is very important to me, like the whiskey heritage the distilling heritage here deserves as much as that. And, what I tell people, like, whether it's an orchard or a farm, like those people, farming is not easy. Like same thing with distilling. Distilling is not easy. Like people are like, oh man, I just put the sugar and the grain and the water and the thing. And it's like, no, it's not easy. There's painstaking process that goes on behind this. And I want you to be able to recognize that in what you taste out of the bottle. Like, so the maltster that I use, he floor malts everything.
Wow.
The farmer that I use, he open pollinate everything. Like there's a lot of craft that goes into what they do, and then also into what I'm trying to do. So,
yeah, cool. So that's an interesting thing, actually. Like this word craft has popped up a bunch, and we had a quick discussion about this before we hit the record button. It kind of means a different thing for different people, right? Some people want to define a craft distillery based on the size of your output or size of the still or whatever. What does it mean to you? Like, what delineates a craft distillery from a non-craft distillery?
I think that what it comes down to is, in my opinion, there is that consistency factor. As a commercial distillery, like you hit on before, you can put your finger on the pulse of what is going to be released every year, the same way, the same time. This is, as a craft distillery, like I'm taking in what I can and producing what I can with that at a very limited scale, but the process behind of where it all comes from. And I think that craft, just like I likened, the craft of growing the grain, the craft of growing the fruit, and the craft of distilling those ingredients, I think that ties it all together as craft. When you don't necessarily know, like the big distilleries, well, I mean, even if you've got a pot still that's 600 gallons or more, and you're using number 2 yellow dent corn to make your bourbon, well, the story behind that number 2 yellow dent corn doesn't matter. The story on the back of that bottle is what matters.
Right.
I want the story of the ingredients to be relevant to what you're getting in that bottle. And I think that's what makes it craft.
Yeah, interesting. It's a tough thing whenever any terminology starts to get used in marketing, right? As soon as it starts to get used in marketing, it kind of suddenly means nothing. It's tough. Like,
well, I mean,
it was like the whole MGP like bullshit that happened. I mean, I think we're past that now. I think the general consumer understands that, and people sourcing whiskey and slapping craft on the back. There's pushback and people hate that now, but it kind of feels like that word is now useless. It doesn't.
Penelope, I don't know if you ever had it. It's good. It's really, really good whiskey. Like, yeah. That's MGP's flagship brand. Like,
oh, I've got nothing against MGP.
But I'm saying,
I've got a thing against deceiving consumers. That's the part that pissed me off. Like, I think sourcing's awesome, dude. Like, if I was ever to open a distillery, I would source a shitload of whiskey, and then I'd do interesting things to it. Whack it in other barrels, finishing barrels. I've thought a long time about bringing in bourbon from America, like MGP bourbon, or sourcing it from wherever, and then doing small runs and ferments of, like 100% New Zealand peat on New Zealand grain, and then blending that in, or so I've got nothing against sourcing whiskey. The issue I have is don't say it's handcrafted and from a craft distillery, but you're buying it in a plastic tote. People
have bought into the story on the back of the bottle, and like I get that. Like I really have a full understanding of that, because like I've worked for pipe valve and fitting companies where the product is generally the same as other pipe valve and fitting companies, but the story behind the company making them is what makes the consumer buy it, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I think as an industry professional, you have to aspire to be better. And being better, like in my mind, like I'll bring up the Waterford Distillery 100 times. Like, I want to be better. I want to be as good as that, because I think that is an aiming point where you're like,
yeah, man,
the story of everything is right there, laid out for the consumer. And I want to get to that point where I can say, like, this is me, this is us, and this is where we're going. And it's not going to be the same every year, because I got it from this field at this time of year. The harvest was early, like we didn't get enough rain, like et cetera, et cetera. Like, I want that to be a part of the story. And I think that is what makes it craft. So even if you're doing it at the scale of a Waterford, which they're doing it at a very large scale, that's still craft because it's very specific.
Yeah, totally. So just to make sure people didn't understand me, I wasn't saying that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like environmentally friendly, right? Everyone slapped that on everything, and now environmentally friendly means absolutely diddly squat. So you need new like specific words to describe what you're actually doing that is actually different than what everyone else does or what used to be done.
But I think that's what we're trying to do with the pre-prohibition style, because
yeah, it's a cool way of going about it.
I think that in a lot of people's minds delineates between something produced en masse and something that's very special.
I think it's an interesting point you had too, where you can have a tiny, commercial distillery, the way you put it, or you can have a huge craft distillery. And I totally understand what you mean there. So, from a commercial point of view, though, it is kind of scary that pretty much every time you make a run, it's going to be different than the last run. How do you deal with that for the brand? Sorry, your camera's gone blurry on us now that we've started recording. So you've got the two bottles sitting behind you there. What's the red one? What's the name of it? And what's what's the mash list?
Honest Hillbilly, the red label is our apple brandy. The apple brandy is, this particular batch was distilled from the cider, is pressed cider, and it's 100% Gold Rush apples. So we had a local orchard here who, she had a bad selling year for cider. She didn't make it through all of her sales of cider. She had totes of this stuff, and we stepped in and we're like, hey, like we can process that and make it into something delicious. So that's our first release of apple brandy. And likewise, the purple label is our Cherokee White Eagle corn whiskey. And it's a clear corn. Cool. It's a clear corn whiskey. I can't tell you how many people that I've spoken to that have tasted it that, especially in this region, they taste it and they're like, man, you took me back to when I was 18 years old and my buddy, went down to West Virginia, got a jar, brought it back up. We all sat on the porch. He's like, that is the corn whiskey of my childhood, or what not childhood. That's the corn whiskey of my youth. Like,
yeah, right. You can't say childhood.
You know what I mean? Yeah,
You're a professional now. Right.
The corn whiskey of my youth.
And is it yellow? You think just Yellow Dent like robbed people of that until this kind of resurgence of more people using Heirloom?
I was at a Moonshine festival 2 weekends ago, and I don't know how you are, but like I can taste yellow corn in corn whiskey. So I think the distinction that I make with people is like, my farmer here, he grows 16 different types of heirloom corn, and I've distilled probably 12 of them, and they all taste completely different.
Yeah.
But I know yellow cracked corn. You open the jar up, I can smell yellow cracked corn. Like I know exactly what that profile is.
We don't get it here, dude. I can't even get Yellow Dent here.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we have Gladfield do a malted maize, which is a great product to work with. Has a diastatic power of absolutely diddly squat, but you can just throw it into a beer mash and mash it, and it makes a nice bourbon or whatever. But that's it, dude. That's all we get. That or feed maize.
Yeah.
So
like I mean, 16 different types of corn.
I haven't been able to play with any of this stuff.
And, so this Cherokee White Eagle corn, the story behind it is they call it the Trail of Tears corn. It's where the Cherokee people brought handfuls of it across the country with them, and then back to the Cherokee Nation in North Carolina. And my farmer actually got the seed, started it as a small patch, and now he grows a lot of it. And he had an excess of it this past year. And I told him I would take some of that off his hands and make whiskey out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of back to how do you deal with this as a commercial distillery? So next time you make an apple product, an apple brandy, in a lot of ways, for most other distilleries, it would be a totally different product, right? It would be like a different label. It would be a different name. How do you guys deal with that? Do you just use that same label with a different date? Or do you make a new label for every batch? Like, how do you kind of communicate to the customer what the product is, but not also have to like have the huge overhead expenses of having to rebrand every freaking run?
So I think where we lie with that is we're still trying to figure that out. But honestly, the back of the label, like on the back of this one, it's 100% Gold Rush apples. I've got, because we've put our feelers out to many different orchards, saying that we will take their seconds and thirds. About 2 weeks ago, I got in about 6,000 pounds of apples, not juice. So those are all fermenting right now. And that apple brandy on the back label will say apple mash brandy.
So it'll still be the same front label.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And does that mean you don't have to reapply for a new TTB label?
You have to reapply every time if you're going to change anything. But I mean, I think that to me is the magic behind being a craft distillery, is that I'm taking what would otherwise be thrown away or excess to anybody and making it into something and presenting it to you as a spirit. And I think that there's, in the art and craft of distilling here in the States, especially like, and abroad, like we want to be able to manage that excess professionally, like, and responsibly. And, you know, I want to be a part of that ecosystem, just based off of like the heritage of this thing, like whether it's moonshining or whatever, and if it requires that I change something small on the label, like I'm not worried about that, because every time you taste it, whether it's this year, next year, or if I put some of that into a barrel for 3 years, 4 years from now, like the different expressions of the thing is my goal.
Yeah, cool.
Not the consistency of, you know, Jack Daniels,
or
like
efficiency
or efficiency. Like, and the same thing with heirloom corn. The efficient, like, bro, there is the starch content on some of this heirloom corn is hot garbage. Like, like you know, like I'll mash. What was the one I did recently? The Creole orange corn, Argentine orange, Creole orange, but the starch content in it, like I mashed 3 pounds per gallon of that corn, just straight corn, and like I still only got, and I did the iodine, like I did everything, like I still only got like a 1065.
Okay, but I mean, like the other thing that I've heard a lot of people talking about, including the Licorice Brothers from Iron Root, is the idea that a lot of these heritage corns are so intensely flavorful that you can use them as a specialty at very low percentages, at like 5% of the grist, and still get a noticeable difference in flavor. So I don't know that orange corn at all, but if that's one of them, right? Like, who gives a flying fornication if it's if the efficiency's crap, if the flavor's good and you use it at 10%?
Well, I mean, that's like, so I ended up taking that corn because of its flavor profile. I'm not a huge rye whiskey fan. I'm not a big 95.5. I'm not a big 95.
Not say that too loud where you are.
Well, I mean, I think it's the people who are used to a 95.5.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the allure behind it. In my opinion, like it may take a lot of aging to make that what people actually think that they like to taste out of a bottle. But if I can incorporate a corn with the sweetness that orange corn brings to the table. So I did a 60% rye, 30% Creole orange, a little bit of light crystal malt and a little bit of biscuit malt. as adjuncts. And that rye whiskey, I've got 2 barrels of it sitting right now, and I mean, it tastes amazing.
Awesome.
Because you get all that sweetness, you know what I mean, from the corn to balance out the I hate spicy, it's grassiness of the rye, I guess.
Yeah, spicy is a weird descriptor for rye, eh? Like I've never thought of it like that. And it took me a long time to figure out what rye tasted like in a rye whiskey because I kept looking for spicy.
So the thing that I liken it to in my brain, because I make Akavit for the Lucky Sign brand, and it's one of our award-winning products. It is caraway, grassy spiciness in my mind. Like if I put Akavit, which is very caraway forward, that's the main Botanical in Akavit. If I put it next to rye whiskey, the notes kind of match up in my mind.
Yeah, I can see that. Caraway makes a lot more sense in my mind too. Yeah, it's an interesting because it's very.
It's more herbal, floral.
Yes, yeah, and like baking spice, not capsaicin or pepper. Yeah, another thing that I haven't played with and don't understand that well, I must admit, is rye. I get it. I understand it. That's really awesome. I love the idea of spirits moving more towards the wine side of things, where it's kind of people talk about vintages, not brands. That makes me excited. I love that idea for multiple reasons, like for difference in expression. You know, you can have the same bottle from the same distillery 4 years in a row and have your favorite out of those 4 and be able to talk about it and debate it and discuss with other people. I love the transparency that it brings in terms of this isn't the same, this is why it's different. And the kind of like it's almost like the idea of perfect imperfections, right? It's things that are different and maybe you didn't even want them to be different, but this is the hand you were dealt, and now you've figured out how to make something awesome with it. That gives me a geek out on as well, dude. I love the idea of that.
But I think that there's also other factors. I mean, like, you know, this past winter when I like first really like came on as head distiller, and because I've been here for a year as the head distiller next month, and I was doing these fermentations, and all 8 of my 50-gallon fermentations got a Brett infection. Like, I had never, as a home distiller, like I didn't know, like, and all of a sudden the whole distillery smelled like Parmesan cheese. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I distilled it all out. The barnyard, the horse blank, like all of that was still there, the cheesy, but I'm aging it right now, and it's maturing. It's turning into interesting flavors. Like that base is still there, but I started doing a lot more reading. Wineries in Europe where it's like they intentionally put Brett into the wine to achieve a certain flavor profile that's, you know, and it's like a seasonal thing. And, you know, because of X, Y, and Z fermentation conditions, they use this to do X, Y, and Z in a certain way. And it's like, well, why can't I do that here as well? Like, you know, like,
or even not at will, like play into the happy, right? Like, you know, a lot of traditional places would be scared to even mention that because it doesn't follow the plan, which means that someone didn't do their job properly and Brett got in when it shouldn't have. And we don't want people to know about that, you know, like I guess that's exactly what I meant in terms, it's a great example of that perfect imperfection. It's something that you never, I mean, maybe you would have tried it, but it popped up, you rolled with it, and now maybe it turns into something special. And who knows? And in like a couple of years' time, you might be purposely inoculating things with Brett to, you know, to blend it in at 10%, or who knows, man.
I fell down the rum rabbit hole on HD Forum pretty hard for about 2 years. I fell down that rabbit hole, and I wouldn't say I'd never get that time back, but man, like it was like all consuming for a while. trying to feed muck pits and like do all kinds of weird stuff. But now commercially, like I know what I like in rum, and I know what I like to taste out of the rum that I've made, and as opposed to like the shit I've made when it comes to rum. But it put me down a rabbit hole where it's like, when that Brett infection happened, I'm like, man, could you imagine using like weird bugs like that? Like I thought that I was cultivating some kind of weird stuff in my muck pit or whatever, like, but man, maybe I can isolate whatever was in that and use it on rum, because the difference between maltose and glucose, like they're different sugars, and whatever's eating them reacts differently to the different sugars that they're eating. So like it might even make something completely different on the palate over here when it comes to like just raw sugar. I ended up falling so far down the rabbit hole that we're going to make rum here, and I found this really obscure, very specific strain of yeast that I want to make it with. And
yeah, dude, let's talk about that. Yeah. Let's talk about that. He mentioned this when we talked the other day briefly, and it was on my notes to come up, and here it is naturally. So let's do it, dude.
There's a website called Boston Apothecary, and like it took me a long time to like come to this resolution, like a lot of digging. And this guy has been putting these papers out online and all these experimentations out online for a number of years now. But the website's Boston Apothecary, and he got his hands on these lost notes and papers from the Arroyo Distillery and Caribbean rum. And essentially he goes down this rabbit hole about yeast and other things in the microbiome in those rum fermentations, and came to the conclusion, as did the guy who wrote the Arroyo papers, came to the conclusion that there's this particular type of yeast that was living alongside Saccharomyces cerevisiae, that was in the fermentations, that was actually producing a lot of the esters.
Interesting.
That were created in those Caribbean rums. And particularly, it's called Schizosaccharomyces pum. And I'm not a scientist, so if you're a scientist out there and I messed that up, I apologize. I'm an infantryman by trade, so. But essentially, this yeast, what he talks a lot about is the. I'm not going to remember the term. It's osmotolerance. Okay. So with the osmotolerance, this yeast, because it's a fission yeast and not a budding yeast like Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So Saccharomyces cerevisiae, it basically creates a tree inside of your fermentation. It buds, and the little bud pops off, and then that yeast grows, and it buds, and that's how it multiplies.
On each cell.
Versus on each cell, yeah. But with the Schizosaccharomyces pum, it literally divides.
It's fission division,
it's a fission yeast. And its osmotolerance allows it to be in very low pH environment and still work. And it also is tolerant. It also means that it's tolerant around other microbiomes. So like bacteria and other weird things that may like be in the muck pit, or if you've got a acetobacter and all those other things floating around. So
now, is this an alcohol producing yeast? It's still Saccharomyces, right? So it still produces alcohol. Okay, cool.
So it still produces alcohol, but it'll do it at further spectrums than Saccharomyces cerevisiae, from what I understand. He said on the one paper, the Royal paper, he said like he saw it producing alcohol at like pH of 3. Like it was still going.
That's insane.
but it was coexisting alongside the other things that were eating the unfermentable sugars.
Yeah, so you got lacto, Brett, fungal, bacteria, and the stuff still chugging along where a normal Saccharomyces would crap out.
Screw this somehow.
Yeah.
I was like, where do I get this Schizosaccharomyces palm? And now that I'm in a legal distillery, like I came to the realization, I was like, oh shit, well, I can just get on the phone and I can start demanding this yeast. Where is it? And quickly that turned into a lot of no's and a lot of, I have to go to this yeast bank that's in England. Then I called them and they were like, well, we can get you a slide, like a single slide of this yeast for like $600. I was like, I'm not an expert at cultivating yeast. Like I dabbled in it. Like I know how to make a yeast brink and all that. Like, but I'm not going to risk $600. Not my money. Ended up with White Labs in North Carolina, who funnily enough, Digger from the television program Moonshiners, he knows the gentleman who started White Labs pretty well, and he's got a pretty good in there for me.
Oh, how good!
Who would have thought, right?
Crazy. So they had it. White Labs had it.
Yeah, and they dug through their yeast bank. It's WL, and I'll tell everybody because, they're cultivating it now for me, but I'm sure they'll do it for anybody. It's WLP 602. Cool. And yeah, I think they're only doing, I don't know. You can only get it at like 350 milliliters is the min order, but it's, they had it. And traditionally this yeast, from what the papers say, it came from, millet beer.
And then it got into the Caribbean?
During the slave trade, a lot of people came from West Africa to the Caribbean, and yeast lives where it wants to live, and I'm sure it made its way through that and through fermentation and et cetera, and the rest is kind of history because now it lives there. And in other places, so where White Lab specifically got this was in a part of France in an orchard. They found it on in an apple orchard that had previously been a port for those kinds of activities as well. So
interesting.
So that whole trade propagated this very specific type of yeast from one place to all over the place, kind of thing. So it's interesting to dive into the microbiome of the history of the microbiome of the world, which is I kind of feel like totally. I got on a short roller coaster ride of trying to figure that out. But now, it'll be here by the end of the month, and I've got a 275 gallon tote of molasses that I'm going to employ it with. So
yeah,
I'm going to give it something to do. Give it a job.
It's funny, man. We've got we finally got a yeast company here in New Zealand. They're our only yeast producer in the country. They're making liquid yeast, mostly for beer. And I have to check in with them and see where they're at on this. But they had a funded a funded project, which was basically to go all around New Zealand and collect yeast from every place they could find it, focusing on native plants, native areas, things that had a story that were New Zealand related, and then propagated them all, tested them all, and trying to isolate some strains that had potential. how do you put it? It's interesting that we've kind of gone full circle, right? It's the same with the ingredients. It used to be you just put stuff together and it magically fermented. And then it was, but if we dip the stick in it and we keep the stick and then we use the stick again, it happens more consistently and more often. And we'll keep some of the lees from the last one, and that's our magic potion that starts the next one and keeps the magic alive. And now it's completely like blitz everything, kill everything, and then pitch a packet of yeast that's made in North America down here in New Zealand, which is cool. Like I get it, I understand, and it allows me in New Zealand to make a beer that tastes like it was made in England. Don't get me wrong, I think that's absolutely awesome. I would never want to not have access to that. But it does also take a little bit of the magic away. And it's such a similar concept to what you're talking about, the ingredients. Every single main spirit or like main style of spirit that we can think of now, every, bourbon, Scotch whiskey, rakia, what's the rice? I want to say koji. That's the yeast. The Korean rice soju. Thank you. All of those, they came from the stuff that we had so much of it that we fed it to animals because we didn't know what to do with it. And now they're like these polished, refined, traditional products that we want, and we grow the stuff specifically to turn it into the thing, So coming full circle and going back to, hey man, like what have we got too much of around here? I hope that one day those things will start turning into traditional products again, right? Like we often get asked here in New Zealand, like what's New Zealand's spirit? We don't have one. What do we have lots of that we feed to animals? Grass. But at the same time, I'm sure there's, I know that I've got 20 kilos of lime sitting there because a friend of a friend makes Texas chili here in New Zealand because they got so pissed off at like the best chili we could get was the old El Paso stuff in a jar. Like that was it, or salsa. So she's made a company that makes salsa. She teed up with a place up in Auckland that grows limes. They've got hundreds and hundreds of kilos of limes at the moment that they cannot sell to anyone for any amount of money because they're yellow. And they are freaking delicious, dude. Like, they're the best limes I've ever had in New Zealand. So much better than the shit that we can get at the supermarket that are this big, and we paid like $30 a kilo for limes here. And these are free because they're yellow. I don't give a fuck if they're yellow. Like, they're delicious. It's crazy. So I guess there must be opportunities around here, and I know there is. Well,
do like I did, because one of our main products at the distillery is limoncello. Like, we are the house that limoncello built. Like, it is our main product. Like people,
I'm going to make limoncello with the limes. That's why I've got them.
Well, but people make, people buy a lot of it. And, I took a look at our limoncello process, and I was like, we're juicing the hell out of these lemons. Like, but you can only really get so much juice out of, like, you can juice the hell out of them, like with a big bladder. Like, we've got a big bladder press that like really juices them pretty dry. But at the same point, it's like lime, or it's like grapes when you make wine. Like, there's still a little bit of something left in there. So what I started doing was taking the lemons that we were juicing for our limoncello, taking those holes, mixing them with water. I mean, the bricks on them is like 9, which I'll take 9 bricks.
Yeah, right. That's 9 bricks you didn't have, right?
I'll take 9 bricks mixed with water. Like, heck yeah. And just adding a shit ton of calcium carbonate to balance out the pH.
Yeah, right.
I just started fermenting them, and I call it lemon liquor. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, but I tell you what, you can make a hell of a damn lemon martini with that shit, and it is really good. Like, really good. Just fermented lemons. That's all. Like,
yep.
But it's the waste from something else that you can turn into something else. Like, I feel like we used to understand that. That's why we made grappa. That's why we made, that's why we made all of these other things. Well, why not just take the waste from other things and make cool shit? All right, perfect.
All right, sorry, folks. We had some technical difficulties there, but we're back. So playing with the new yeast, dude. What are you hoping to get out of it? Or is it just a pure fact-finding mission? You're going to pitch it, see what happens, and go from there?
I think what we're going to end up doing is number one, I'm going to take a small sample of it and make a yeast brink and actually cultivate that small sample so I can isolate it and keep it isolated. But then I'm going to take the rest and I'm basically going to do a generational rum like I would normally do. Try to get back and basically do I hate calling it a half-assed Cousins process, but like something like the Cousins process using some of the thumper stuff that I have my access to here.
Cool. So I think the Cousins process is pretty interesting. Do you want to describe that for anyone that's interested in rum? It's well worth, if you don't know what this is, it's well worth knowing it. So shoot, dude.
I mean, like the way I understand it, and like I said, it's kind of like a half-assed way that I would be doing it, but you're essentially, so number one, you want to do rum generationally. As you start out, you never really use that first batch of distillate as something that you make a finished product out of. It just informs the rest of the batches. So what I would do is I would make my first fermentation, run it, strip it, distill it. For what I'm doing, I would distill it again, keep the hearts from that, and save the high wines and low wines, which is essentially the tails, different parts of the tails from that distillation. Then in subsequent distillations, I'm going to be using at least 20% dunder or backset from the still to go into the next fermentation, ferment. At the end of that fermentation, primary fermentation, I'm going to inoculate with vinasse or muck from my muck pit. Let that go for another couple of days. Strip it, distill it, like for what my equipment allows me to do. Strip it, distill it, and just keep going like that until like 5 generations. And then on that last one, what I plan to do is take the high and low wines from that last one, which should be extremely flavorful by that point, and have the content of, especially in these Arroyo papers, like this where a lot of those rum oils are that create the esters, putting those in their subsequent, I don't have a true double retort, but I can use 2 different pieces of equipment as thumpers or retorts.
Okay.
And because so this one here, this is an inline thumper. Alan's been playing with this. I got one off of Wayne Herbert at Ozark Steelworks here in the States. It acts like a thumper, but it's an open system instead of a closed system like a traditional retort. So, but essentially doing a sort of Cousins process where you're using those high and low wines, which people think means heads and tails. It's just different parts of your tails to inform the flavor of the subsequent distillations.
Yeah, cool. So you're not going to do the full Cousins process, like adding lime and then sulfuric acid and...
I can't justify that. Like, as much as I would like to capture the rum salts and all of that, like at scale, I'm not, I don't have a lab to,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, they're like, and I'm not only making rum. So like the amount of art. That's why I appreciate the art and the craft of how they produce rum the way that they produce rum. It's like that craft is very specific. Their aim is so it was something that was so natural that is now so scientific that I can't do it at that scale, but I can do my version of it. Like Christian joked, he was like, we're just going to call it the Jackson process. And I was like, well, because like at a small scale, when I've done this at home, it has worked out really, really well.
Yeah.
So now I'm, bigger equipment, bigger toys to play with. Like I'm hoping to take what I've done at home and like, when I fell down that rabbit hole, I fell down it pretty hard. I'm hoping to take that and put it into practice here at the distillery. So,
yeah, awesome. So we've talked about one of your three brands a lot. Do you want to give us a rundown on which of the other two brands does it make sense to talk about next? Do you think
we can talk about Lucky Sign, because I think that when it comes to the way that we wanted to try to structure this, is that Honest Hillbilly is our expression and where our true creativity lies. But with Lucky Sign, we're like considering that like our premium brand. It is our botanical spirits. So gin, lemon dry gin, and American gin, aquavit, limoncello. We have a cinnamon bourbon. We do rock and rye, a lot of bar spirits. And, we're very successful with that line in a lot of the local bars around here in Western PA. So for that brand, we, like I told you, like we consider ourselves a flavor company. So like if we're going to make limoncello, it's not going to be just regular ass limoncello. Like I have the same palate as Christian, where I don't like really super sweet stuff.
Right.
So
okay.
With our limoncello, we add basil to the maceration. We add make a French oak wood tea to give it some tannins and give it some dryness, versus like traditional limoncello where it's like it's sweet enough to make your teeth tacky.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't like that. That mouthfeel. So
yeah, I'm with you on that one.
We're taking what would otherwise be traditional spirits with that brand and elevating them. Just like something with you and I had talked about our rock and rye.
Yeah, dude. What's the story with rock and rye? Like, what's the history of it, first of all, and then like, what is it now?
So traditionally, like going back to like 1884-ish, there's a company now that makes it and has been making it since then. But traditionally, it was a remedy for the flu. Like it was truly invented as a medicinal whiskey product. Oftentimes it had, it was rye whiskey with cinnamon, with rock candy for sweetness. They would also macerate oranges, orange peels, lemons, a bunch of different stuff in the rye whiskey. So I tell people, like, think an old fashioned in a bottle. And that's what the history of rock and rye is. And it's truly like the history of what the old fashioned is nowadays. So a medicinal whiskey that has a sordid past, because during Prohibition, like that was one of the ways that they got around the revenuers, and they're selling medicinal whiskey as rock and rye. But also, how can we take a spirit that has a past and a history like that, that's really native to Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania was like the rye whiskey capital of the U.S. for the longest time. How can we take that and elevate it
So we add papaya to ours. We add apricots. We add oranges. Like, none of this is proprietary because, I mean, if you're out there and you want to make rock and rye, like, you can find the base recipe online. But what you often do and what I do, or what I'm trying to do, is like encourage people, like, put your spin on it, bro. Like, especially with these botanical spirits and these, macerations and these infusions, like, there's 100 different ways that you can satisfy your own palate while doing something that's traditional.
Cool.
But rock and rye is one of those things, man. Like, it's like it's a blank palette that has a history to it, but you can paint whatever you want on it,
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I definitely need to try that. I've got a rye whiskey sitting there at the moment that's probably aged as much as it's going to age, and it's good, but it's too much for me to drink by itself. So if I layer other flavors on top of that, I think it could turn out pretty good. Does that sound like it would work?
I think that, yeah, definitely try it. I mean, I've recently taken some what I think are over oaked barrels of rye. Like, we've got some barrels of rye. Some of them are a little bit over oaked, and just because, I mean, like, I think that your palate's kind of like mine in a lot of ways, from what I could tell. Is like,
yeah, I think so.
The new charred white oak just it hits me in a way that it's a bit too much. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's too tannic a lot of times, and tannic and rye kind of clash in my palate brain. So, like, I've taken these ones that I considered over oaked, and we're making our rock and rye with them now. And, that orange, especially we use the peel and the juice of the orange, dried papaya, dried apricots, cinnamon, and then the outlier, which is in all like historical rock and rye, is horehound. Because so there's a difference between horehound candy and horehound.
Okay.
This is horehound.
Okay.
It is very much an herb. It is a lot. I'm going to open it so I can refresh my.
Get a sniff.
Earl Grey tea.
I'm just doing some Googling now. It says like root beer and licorice kind of adjacent.
It is once you macerate, but the herb, the dried herb itself is, it's very much herbal tea. And I think what it does in the rock and rye, in my opinion, is it gives astringency. I try to explain to people the difference between bitterness and astringency a lot of times. And
yeah,
it's lost on some people where it's like, oh, well, that's bitter, and they think astringency. It's like, no, like, one is, and the other one's.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So that's how I explain to people, like, one's up here and the other one is back here. But balancing bitterness and astringency with sweetness is like a magical game you can play with recipes. And different amounts, like, if you can find that balance in a recipe, like, that's a lot of time my aim, especially with macerations. If I'm going to macerate anything, I want to be able to find that in between. So a lot of times people add a lot more sugar, and then you get more bitterness up front, but sweetness in the back. But then if you add too much astringent, like, tell me if I'm making sense, because I can.
Yeah, no, I'm following you so far.
But if you don't have enough sugar, the astringency takes over and you lose the bitterness, but you have like that salivating or drying effect on the back of your mouth.
Yeah.
But if you can find that happy in between.
astringency for me, the classic example is a oversteeped tea bag. So if you oversteep tea, it's going to be astringent. And yeah, I totally know what you mean. Like if you have tea that's too astringent, you throw a couple of teaspoons of sugar in it and it combats that pretty well.
Yeah.
And that's the more like puckering sort of flavor to me. Whereas bitter is more, it sort of settles, it's a heavier sensation. And if it's bitter, adding sugar doesn't necessarily get rid of that. And sometimes it can accentuate it. I've already decided, dude, I'm going to make a rock and rye afterwards. I might have to,
good, man.
Like, have you got a recipe that you can kind of off the top of the head for people at home, or should I touch with you afterwards? And
I can definitely give you something that you can put in the show notes or something as per like specifics. But I mean, you're working with leaders.
Oh no, do it in whatever you think of, dude, and I can adjust later on.
I mean, like if you've got, like, say you got 5 gallons of rye. Well, let's at a home distillery level. Let's say you got 2 gallons of rye whiskey. I would go with.
That's still a shitload of whiskey, dude, for a home distiller.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying, Jesse. I'm trying.
It's all good. I mean, to be honest, I think most of the people that listen to this podcast are more erring on the industry side of things anyway. But
15 liters, you're looking at 760 grams of dried apricot, 760 grams of dried papaya, 800 grams of orange. That's the combination of orange peel and juice.
So just like if you weigh the whole oranges and then juice them and peel them.
Yeah.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
10 grams of star anise.
Ooh, okay.
18 grams of horehound and 10 grams of cinnamon. For at least, test it like at that batch size, it might turn out quicker. Like whenever I do any of these batches, I'm testing them like every 5 days just to be sure, because I'm doing, 100-gallon batches of this.
Yeah. You don't want to get over astringent or whatever. So what's the rough timeline for it though? Like, say like five days, a week?
At that size, I would start looking to pull it in like a week and a half.
Okay, cool. And you just do a cold maceration? There's no not like absinthe or anything?
Yeah, no, just a cold maceration. And then at the end of all that, after you pull it off of the botanicals, let it sit for probably like another day or two, and then add 1.9 liters of simple syrup.
Oh, okay.
Now, you can get creative with the simple, as I found, like reading about rock and rye.
So that's where the rock candy or whatever would come in.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the leading historical brands in the U.S. here for their rock and rye, it's a honey simple syrup. So you can get creative with what your sugar adjunct is there, like, whether it's honey or, maybe you want to get crazy, use corn syrup. Like, I don't know what most people
just
like
something sweet though to balance it.
Yeah, just something sweet to balance it.
Yeah, cool. And how do people normally drink rock and rye? Is it just like a cocktail in a bottle kind of thing? Just pour it over ice and sip away?
It's essentially an old fashioned in a bottle at that point. Think about the citrus and other things that are in an old fashioned. It's got all those same notes.
You made the bitters in the spirit instead of
exactly. So you're essentially just bottling that, and just over ice, man. Like, it's a great porch sitter.
That's awesome, dude. I'm gonna have to give that a nudge for sure. I might have to make a video about that.
Well, I think your viewers would like it too, because it's also a secondhand use of something that you may not have other, like, some people make batches of stuff. I know I've made plenty of batches of stuff where I'm like, gosh,
Yeah. And I imagine it's one of those things that it would work with anything that's an aged spirit, right? Like if you had just a bourbon that didn't, quite turn out how you wanted. I mean, it would work with rum too, right? Like it's going to be delicious either way.
In the U.S., according to the TTB, there is a category for rock and rye, rock and bourbon, rock and rum, rock and gin. Okay. Like it's a category according to the TTB. So
interesting.
Which I didn't know before I came on here that it was a category, but it is a whole category unto its own.
So I'm imagining this is still relatively high ABV too. It's not like a 15% liqueur sort of thing, because you started with what'd you say, 15 liters, and you only added, the only thing that really diluted it was the orange juice and the simple syrup. So it's still going to be 30-35% or something, right?
Yeah, I think ours averaging out around like 35-ish. So, I mean, it's, you can do other things, like you can add water. Like if you want it to be a less potent spirit, you can add proofing water to your barrel-aged spirit before you do, or after you do the maceration, or as you're macerating, slowly proof down. We do that with our cinnamon bourbon, our Winking Devil, which is another elevated, we call it's like elevated fireball.
Right.
we use Vietnamese cinnamon, so not just like regular old whatever cinnamon. Szechuan peppercorns, which do this they do this really fun thing where it numbs your tongue as you're drinking it, which is kind of novel. Szechuan peppercorns, cloves, and a little bit of star anise. And I mean, it turns out freaking delicious. The best thing is that as Winking Devil, it usually ends up around 33.3%. So it's 33.3 proof. So it's 60. Oh yeah, I'm gonna mess that up. It ends up being 66.6.
Yeah, right. Proof 33% ABV. Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool.
But that's Lucky Signs as a whole. Like, and our botanical spirits are like our Akavit. We got double gold at the World Spirits Competition in San Francisco this year for our Akavit.
Awesome.
So I mean, just really great heritage recipes that we've taken and elevated to how we like to taste things.
Yeah, cool, dude. Are you exporting or distributing at all, or is it more of just local bar scene? Like, I know people who want to get hold of some of your stuff after hearing this. So, what are their chances, dude? Or is it take a trip to Pennsylvania?
So at the moment, like Pennsylvania is your best bet. We're a small brand. We're talking with distribution on the East Coast of the U.S. right now, and trying to get that set up. But I mean, if you're in Pennsylvania, you got a buddy in Pennsylvania, you can buy and ship online here in the state. We are a 3-tiered state. It's different than every state's different in the U.S., whether you're a control state, 3-tier, 2-tier, like it's all jumbled up.
Yeah.
But essentially, like, it's the same thing that I tell people who are like, oh, like, Moonshiner Joe, where are you at? And I'm like, well, I'm here 5 days a week. Like, I'm not in the backwoods anywhere. Like, you can come check me out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Come hang out. Come grab a bottle, and I think the cool thing about that is that, I've had people come from like 3 hours away, 5 hours away, 6 hours away, and they come and, they'll hang out for, a couple of hours, and usually I'm either mashing fruit or mashing in a whiskey or something. Like, you get to see how the sausage gets made. And
yeah, dude, that's cool.
When I it's a different experience. Like, people are like, well, I've been on the bourbon trail and I saw the big waterfall of whiskey coming out of the Jim Beam still. And it's like, I tell you what, it's a little different here. Like,
Yeah.
and the sausage is a little bit harder to make.
Yeah, totally, dude. It's a different thing. So you mentioned too, obviously, that's a very locally poignant historic drink, being rye.
Mm-hmm.
But being in the area you're in, there's also a very long and illustrious moonshining kind of culture, history, so on and so forth. How does that interplay with you now being a legitimate professional paying tax distillery, and like what's the feeling around there? Because there's so many people that I see, you see the oh, they paid tax on it, it ain't shine kind of vibe, the like outlaw till death kind of vibe. Like what's your take on it? With like I'm just seeing that internet bullshit / reality TV stuff. So what's it actually like there?
Well, like I look at it, man, and I made these T-shirts because I felt it like was really honest. In Pittsburgh, we say yins instead of y'all.
Oh, right. Okay.
But we are very much still in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. So I made a T-shirt that said yins Appalachian enough. Because I feel like we are Appalachian enough here in Pittsburgh, PA. And anybody who looks or truly wants to see what the history of this thing is that we do, like this is in the United States what I consider to like Pittsburgh's the heart of it all. Just in terms of, after the Revolutionary War, this is where the Whiskey Rebellion happened, where people fought against paying taxes on their alcohol against the United States government. And I think I mentioned to you before, like literally there's a historic marker about a quarter mile from my house just south of Pittsburgh where 500 armed rebels came and burned down a revenuer's house. General Neville, he was the tax collector for alcohol for this region in Pennsylvania. They went and burned down his house, and me and my two boys walked the little creek that led up to that farmhouse, and we find like jug shards and pottery shards and all kinds of stuff in this creek, like on the Whiskey Rebellion Trail. And it's like, I don't know how you could separate. In my mind, people are like, okay, moonshine, blah, blah, blah. Like, but in my mind, I can't separate the fact that I'm getting all of my grain from here. The history of the spirits that I'm making is from here. I'm making it here. Like, where's the line of delineation between heritage, moonshine, and rebel history versus what I'm doing now, which is, I mean, industry-wide, I'd say it's pretty rebellious because
yeah, that's a good point.
I'm taking a lot of risk.
yeah.
making products, making the products that I'm making. Like, I think that's where the rebellious spirit comes in. And you can't. I don't think that you can draw a line in the sand and make that delineation, like in my mind, because of how close we are to it.
Yeah, interesting. Do you get pushback on that? Or is it kind of like a friendly, like people like to joke about it, but they don't really care? Or like, what's the vibe?
I think people, well, it's just like on the show, like, it's like people want you to be making it in the woods, under the light of the moon. But I'll reveal the big secret that I think that everybody secretly knows, but nobody talks about. Every moonshiner worth their salt from the 1940s on, most of them were indoors in a shed somewhere or garage, or hell, God forbid, in a garage downtown in a major city, making moonshine there. It doesn't all necessarily happen in the woods, because I think
Right.
what a lot of people found out real quick is that there's this thing called the elements, and they suck. I mean, they suck. And number two, on top of that, they really suck for running a still.
Yeah.
Like bad.
Yeah.
If it started, like, really suck. But I mean, like, so when you're talking about it in those certain terms, like, I don't see why there would be any pushback, because the people that are in the home distilling community, the people that are in the moonshine community, I have yet to really meet anybody who exclusively runs in the woods next to a creek.
Yeah, right. It seems too like there's, even within, to break it down further, it seems like there's more, how do you put it? There's kind of another sublayer of all of it. It's kind of like people just like being pirates, and one way to express that is by moonshining. Do you know what I mean? Like there's kind of that side of it, and then there's the other side that's like, no, I love the art of this. I love the craft of it. The thing that is important to me is what I actually make. And if there's legal aspects to that, then so be it. I don't really give a shit.
Yeah.
And it seems to, and it's so hard for me to like judge because I'm so far removed from it, dude. Like, moonshine here is a product, not a way of life or a culture, or, you know, it's the thing that comes in the thing that looks like a mason jar at the bottle store. Like, that's what moonshine is in New Zealand.
But I think that's where you, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that the how do I put it? The times that I've ever had pushback in videos, or, you know, people having a go at me, or saying that something should be done one way rather than another because of moonshine, those people never cared about the quality of the product. Sorry, guys, more technical issues. I don't know. But yeah, I basically, dude, I was just saying, like, every time I've ever heard people have a go at me for, you know, not being moonshine or whatever, which I'll be honest, man, like from the beginning, my plan was to separate myself from that as much as physically possible, because I didn't want all of the extra connotations that came along with it. And like, part of the project for me was making it a legitimate hobby. And in my mind, to make it a legitimate hobby, you can't be spouting from the roof that you're doing something illegal and fuck the authorities. Like, you've kind of got to be a little bit tactful about it and bring it in.
Well, but that's the other side to it, Jesse, is that like the moonshiners who got caught are the ones that we're talking about. I've got people that slide in my DMs and it's like, oh, I've been doing this for 40 something. Like, I understand that. Like, and I came into this with the same, because I've been following your journey. Like, I came into this with the same mentality where it's like, I want to make this as well as I can make it. Yeah. I'm not making it to, turn a profit. Like, and every time I'm on that television show, like, I also try to stress that, like, and I very often say, like, no, we're not doing that, because like we did a pear and corn moonshine, and we were going to sugar in, and like while we were on camera, I was like, look, I'm at the only thing I'll add is a half a pound of sugar per gallon. Like, I'm not like, there's no reason to add all like 150 pounds of this sugar to this mash. Like, there's no point. You're just gonna make hot liquor, and like, I get it. We want volume, but I'm here to make good stuff. Yeah. And I feel like that's the vibe that I have brought to the table on that show, and the vibe that I'm trying to bring to the table with this stuff. It's like, I'm here to make good stuff.
Yeah, totally. And
for it to be good stuff, it has to be special. And, you know, darn it, if my outlaw ways have been, crushed by the taxman, but like, you can still be an outlaw and make good stuff. And I think that's totally what I tell people. I'm like, look, like, because I very often get jars handed to me, and I love that, because I I want people to know, like, because my palate is different than everybody else's, but like very often it's cuts. I mean, like when I taste people's stuff, I'm like, you kept way too much on that end. And a lot of times in the moonshine community, like people get greedy. Like you got to realize that you're not the biggest, baddest outlaw out there running a 600-gallon submarine pot still in the woods to pay your mortgage at the end of the month or pay for your land or your property taxes because you can't make ends meet otherwise. Like you're making a very small batch product for you and your friends most of the time. Why not make it good?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, things have changed a lot for me now. I think partially it was ignorance on my part. Because we've got it good here and it's legal and it has been for, not for ages, but for a decent amount of time. To me, the whole idea of this right has been taken away from me, and I believe that it is a right that I should be able to act on. So I'm going to, like that didn't factor into it for me. And additionally to that, now I'm in a position where I've been doing this for a long time. The community is pretty damn amazing in terms of what YouTube can be and what the comment section can be in YouTube. Like we've got a really good group of people that pretty much self-regulate themselves and understanding, compassionate, helpful, encouraging to new distillers or people that are getting into the hobby or that are having issues, which is amazing. So I don't have to like, dude, for a long time, I didn't even want to do apple pie. I was like, this is the pinnacle of what the rest of the world sees as banjos and overalls. I'm not going to touch that shit, like I'm not going anywhere near that because I don't want to encourage the wrong, and now I've like realized like why it means something to other people and why it's important to them and why the rebellion kind of, it's not just about the spirit, if that makes sense.
But the heritage is still there, man. Like, and if you like, this is why I'm operating in this space, especially with Honest Hillbilly and the Outpost, the way I am, is like the heritage is still there. I'm using top quality heirloom grain fruit straight from the local orchard. Like, this is about as close to the ground of moonshine that I feel like you can get, because that's essentially what it was made from in the past. Like, it's especially something like we're making an apple rye, which is a split brandy. Very well-known traditional spirit, pre-prohibition. Fruit generally, especially apples, have pretty low bricks. Like, I mean, you can get like 12 points out of apples a lot of time. But on the other end, what they found is that you can bump the potential ABV of that fruit with grain. So the combination of the two was an extremely popular style of spirit that has since fallen out of favor because of all the other spirits that we make. But if that's not as close to moonshine or outlaw as you can get, then I don't know what to tell folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, dude, you're never going to please everyone, right? And that's fine. Like, you don't have to. Like, you don't need to. And they don't have to like what you're doing. It's cool. And I just, it's an interesting opportunity for me to get a little bit more of a finger on the pulse from someone who's in an area where, that matters a bit more. That's cool. So, but we've danced around this whole idea of the Moonshiners TV show as well, dude. And I still haven't. I tried to find legitimate ways of watching the show, and then I tried to gar it, and even that was difficult. So then I jumped on YouTube and watched some clips that they have up on the Discovery stuff there. It's such a weird dichotomy to me. I feel like the first few episodes were great TV, fucking terrible as a resource for distilling, like almost by the nature of what it was. Like they needed, it was the drama, not how to make the sausage, right? Yeah. And now it seems like that mix of the two has shifted a little bit.
So my foray into the television program was through Moonshiners Master Distiller. So,
and that's very different, isn't it? Like I didn't realize for a long time that was a totally different thing. But that seems much more focused on actually less drama, more make good stuff.
You're actually distilling. And a lot of the people that go on that show, it's their first time actually distilling in public and in front of people, and some of those people, it's the first time that people who have a discerning palate are actually tasting their stuff that they're making, and it's it can be pretty nerve-wracking, right? But at the same time, so my foray into it was my introduction to the show. I had been a fan and watched it for the longest time, but being on it, that was my first intake of it. And when they asked me to be on the, Digger called me up. He's like, "Hey, buddy, you want to come down here to Tennessee and run some liquor with us and all this stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, but if I can contribute."
Right. If I can still be me. Exactly.
And I was like, you guys know who I am and what I like to do. I love nerding out on this stuff. If I can do that on TV, then that's the role that I want to play in this production. And they very much let me do that. We figured out on the one episode last year, we figured out how to reverse spherification on a cocktail and make shine pods.
I was watching that. That's cool. I may have already got in touch with someone who's got the what is it, calcium carbonate to solidify and the alginate to coat.
And this is the mistake that they made on the show. You really have to be careful what you fill them with.
Yeah.
or else they are just not appetizing at all. Careful selection, or else it looks like you're eating embryos or something.
They did look pretty terrible. I was thinking powdered sugar or sherbet or something to coat it so it doesn't have that it doesn't look like something out of fucking Ghostbusters.
Yeah, that would be the only issue is, and we ran into this. So I got the idea off of the Glenlivet.
They did the whiskey pods.
They did the whiskey pods, right? And I think the problem is that you have to store them in whatever liquid is inside of them.
Oh, really?
Or else that outer pod, it will start to degrade and disintegrate. So if you're making a cocktail, you have to store it in the cocktail that you made on the inside, and it'll last. I think the longest ones lasted maybe a week.
Huh. Okay. I was thinking more like house party style, you make them and have them that afternoon kind of thing. Because I assumed they wouldn't last for long. The other thing I was thinking is obviously you had the issue of alcoholic, but an alcoholic liquid doesn't want to freeze at normal freezer temperatures. So you got to proof it down I did some quick Googling and it looked like the 20 to 30% range is about as good as you're ever going to get. Yep. And probably just shoot for 20% if in a home freezer. But I was thinking, what about liquid nitrogen?
Well, if you did liquid nitrogen, but there's also other freezers that hold, you can hold dry ice in, freezers that make dry ice.
Yeah, but I don't have access to that. I can go get dry ice or liquid nitrogen.
You got somebody
I can
that
go
makes
buy
ice
some.
cream around you.
I don't know. Maybe it's a job for. Yeah, there you go.
Maybe
I find somebody to go collaborate with.
Because, like, yeah, I mean, like, I know my dad used to have an ice cream company alongside his barbecue company, and
Okay.
that was one of the things was we used a shit ton of dry ice to keep the ice cream, but we also had we got it from a ice company, and they had some kind of special refrigerator. So I don't know. There's got to be somewhere. There's got to be one somewhere on the island, Jesse.
Yeah, I'll look into it, dude. But I mean, that was the other reason that I was thinking of absinthe is because you can proof it down to 20%. That's kind of how you drink it anyway. I'm definitely going to give these probably not whiskey pods a go. But you said something to me when we were talking beforehand. You described the Moonshiners show as WWE for Moonshiners, and I thought that was freaking hilarious. I mean, like, can you go into a bit of detail on that? And because there is still, I don't know, there's still this debate about, is it real? Is it not real? How are they actually like making liquor in the woods? Like all of that sort of stuff. So I don't know how much you're allowed to say or not, but have at it. I mean,
the reason why I describe it that way is you go and listen to any of those guys from WWE, and it's like, well, did you really fall through the barbed wire cage and down 30 feet onto the mat? It's like, well, if you saw it on TV, then I probably really did that. Was I bloody when I did it? And it's like, well, yeah. It's like, well, I did that. And I did it for TV. Like, and then sometimes, a celebrity will come out and, beat the biggest guy in the world championship match and somebody who has no business beating, and well, that was probably fake. So there's portions of it that are completely and utterly real and portions that aren't. And I think that that's the allure behind what it is we do. Like, just like I told you before, the Moonshiners get caught are the Moonshiners that broadcast exactly what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, right.
People are willing to suspend their disbelief to watch our television program because of the heritage of the thing here in the States. And conversely, we have a huge European following. Like Discovery UK on YouTube gets probably quadruple the amount of views on the Moonshiners clips than the Discovery US does, because people are like, what are those crazy American fucks doing? but it's a huge draw for the heritage. It tells a story, and I think that oftentimes the story is misaligned with stereotypes and everything else, but there are genuine people and genuine nuggets of gold that exist alongside whatever you don't like about the show.
Yeah, totally.
You just have to be present for them, and I think that that's why I called it the WWE for Moonshiners, because it's the same thing there. Like truly athletic, great actor, like great actual wrestlers, like Kurt Angle. Like, why would Ronda Rousey go to the WWE? She's a great fighter. Well, because it's entertainment, and she gets to still do the fighting thing, even though she couldn't do it at the MMA level anymore. Like, if
they're actually trying to kill each other. Exactly.
So it's like,
no, it's a good analogy, because you can't take away. There's like how do you put it? There's a cycle you go through.
Yeah.
You're a kid and you're like, holy shit, this is the greatest thing ever. And then someone like tells you that Santa Claus isn't real. You're like, oh, this sucks. And then you grow up a little bit and like listen to stories from Stone Cold and stuff. And you're like, no, like they're actually freaking badass, like totally badass. Like, yeah, they knew who was going to win and they had a general idea of what the fight was, but like that doesn't mean that you don't have to be an absolute badass to like pull that entertainment piece off, right? Exactly. So I kind of get the analogy. Yeah, like maybe some of it's scripted. Maybe we know what's going to happen.
I mean,
maybe the person that won wouldn't win in a blind competition, but there's still cool people doing cool shit.
You can tell me how real it is, and I mean, I'll tell this as an anecdote. Tell me how real it is when they ask you to carry 50-pound bags of sugar into the woods, up a hill, 5 different times, because you got to get the close-up, the non-sync wide, the punch-in, the B-roll, the drone shot of it all, and they're all different takes, and you got to do it all those times.
Yeah.
Like, I here's another one. I picked corn for 5 hours one day. We were picking corn, and we made mashes with it, and I was picking corn 5 hours. And they're getting insert shots. We're reaching in for the corn. Okay, get that one. Okay, we're filling the bags, dragging the bags through the field, and like 2 seconds made it on TV.
Yeah. Like, you're like, couldn't we have just like planned that and like picked 2 pieces of corn for you? Yeah.
Right. So like, tell me it's real. Tell me it's fake. Like, I'll tell you, I've sweated a lot doing it. I mean, it's work, and it's hard work, and it's just like making liquor. I mean, like, people are like, oh, this is easy. This could be. It's like, no, this is not the easiest thing you can do in your life.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I like the amount of times that I find it hard to get motivated, because for me to do anything, I have to be motivated to actually do the thing, and I have to be motivated to video it. Because if I do the thing and don't video it, then the video sucks. And just little things, dude, like just mashing in. If I'm not videoing it, I can get that done in 25 minutes. Easy, from beginning to end. Like, weigh the grain, grind it, mash in, walk away, done. If I'm videoing it, it's going to take me 2 to 3 hours just to do that. And then I get like, an hour's rest while it mashes. And then there's just everything takes longer when you have to video it. And
well, just like they tell me on the TV show, it didn't happen if it didn't get on camera. So
Yep.
And I mean, I try to practice the same thing here, because I mean, like, I do stuff for social media, my social media, and my wife does our distillery social media. And like, she's like, she'll text me during the day. She'll be like, "Are you taking video of stuff?" I'm like, I'm trying.
Yeah,
but
it's
I get
rough,
it, man. I get it.
Have you learnt much? Like, have there been things, like times when you've been filming, like watching over someone's shoulder, other people gave you suggestions? Like, how often do you learn something during the process of filming on that show? Specifically about distilling or an ingredient?
Every time that, and I'm very open about this, every time that I'm with Mark and Digger, I learn something new, man. And I mean, honestly, the biggest challenge is doing it outside. And running like big sloppies, 250-gallon pot with a propane core burner on it. Like, the variables with that, running a pot that big outside, like, you have to furnace it in with bricks. There's so much that goes into it, and I don't know anything about how to do that.
Yeah.
And they've taught me from the ground up about, like, just that operation in general. I mean, and then also knowing, like, they may be one way on television, but like Digger especially, like, he is a wealth of knowledge about yeast strains, enzyme, like places where you can get different types of enzymes out of different things. Like, he really knows his brewing science.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, that's something that, for me to be able to get down there and stand in the middle of the woods and hear somebody talk intelligently and affectionately about the science behind something like that, then, like, that's what the show has been for me.
So the big question, dude, there's all these like theories about how you're just like running water through stills in the woods. What can you tell us?
look, sometimes Stone Cold was really bleeding, and other times he wasn't really bleeding.
Okay. I hear what you're putting down.
I mean, I don't
sometimes
think
it was a squib, sometimes it was a razor blade. I get it. Okay.
I don't think you can. If you're paying that close of attention, then you're probably not a fan of the television show.
Yeah. All right. I hear you, dude. All right, man. This has been an absolute blast, dude. So give us all of the details where people can find everything to do with Lucky Signs and yourself for social media and so on and so forth. And I'll make sure to put that in the intro for people as well.
Yeah, so you can find me at the Out Post Distillery on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And then also J.J. Jackson on Facebook as well. And then you can find Lucky Sign Spirits. It's Lucky Sign Spirits on Instagram, Facebook, and LuckySignSpirits.com, where if you are in the state of Pennsylvania, you can order. We do ship inside the state. And then also Honest Hillbilly is a part of the Lucky Sign Spirits brand for now. So you can find all what's coming out, what we have going on at the distillery, just all inside of that Lucky Sign Spirits brand. So, but I mean, at the Out Post Distillery, I'm trying to post pretty much every day and keep people abreast to, process. I mean, you do it on your channel, like process. This is what's going on. This is me smashing apples. This is me grinding plums and grain and all that jazz. So come check me out. Definitely give me a follow. Oh, lest we forget about the China app. Tickety Talk. Let me tell you, we're all over that app. We're coverage. Our coverage is good. People are talking about it being the best coverage. But so on TikTok, it's the Out Post Distillery. Come check me out on there. We're always doing fun stuff. We go live. I go live on there a bunch. So if you catch it live, that'd be awesome. So
JJ may have mentioned, I can't remember if it was when we started talking or in between when we had technical difficulties. He mentioned that he had a Donald Trump impersonation. He was like, yeah, I won't do that though, dude. I'm so glad you did, because you fucking nailed that.
Let me tell you, it's maybe the best whiskey. People are talking about it being the greatest whiskey.
Oh, hilarious. All right, man, this has been really cool, dude.
Man, Jesse, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll be getting in touch about the Rock and Rye and about the Whiskey Pods. I'm going to get those two projects off. But yeah, thanks heaps for talking, dude.
Yeah, brother. It's my pleasure. My pleasure, man.
A huge thank you to J.J. Jackson for being on the podcast. Thank you so much, dude. I legitimately, completely and utterly enjoyed that conversation with you, dude. And I appreciate being able to chat with you a little bit afterwards as well. I hope we keep that friendship going. For those of you that are following along, you've made it this far. Yes, I did do the reverse verification project. I've finished making them. I've got all the footage ready. I just need to edit it. Didn't quite go the way I'd planned when we were talking in this podcast, and it took a slight detour into Jello shots, but they turned out amazing. That video is coming real soon. Make sure to check out all of J.J. Jackson's socials, so on and so forth. Go over there, give him some love, follow up. It's a pretty cool guy. I'll catch you next time, guys. Keep chasing. See ya.